Okay, so we're just going to do a little tiny quick review about editing, specifically editing in Google Classroom. Most of this, again, is a review, so you should know a lot of the things that I'm going to show you. First things first, I wrote this very quickly, I'd say 5 minutes or less. Yours should probably take you more than 5 minutes to write. I just did this as an example of how to correct things. First things first, you need your name, the date. Writing prompt is fine. Let's go with the title, anything you want. I did quarantine for days because then you can say it like quarantine for days, which in my opinion is super fun. So let's look first at tools. One thing I want you to do is make sure you have the spelling and grammar checked. So go to the first thing here, scroll down, spelling and grammar. Make sure that this is checked because if not, it will not underline it for you. So it is checked, show spelling suggestions, show grammar suggestions, okay? So what all those do is one, it underlines, so you see how I have multiple things underlined. Again, I made mistakes intentionally so that we could go ahead and take a look at it. So anything you see that's underlined, colored, something's wrong there. So the first thing you always can do, even if you don't want to go through on your first edit and reread, is just click on these. So do a 2-finger click. So outweigh should be one word, is what that's saying. This sentence says, I am not sleeping as well as normal, comma, am. It says explore am. There we go. I am nervous about my family and friends. Okay. Another thing really quickly, let's talk about proper common nouns. We've done a lot of work with that. We know that proper nouns are the name of a particular person, place, or thing, idea, animal. We've talked about all those, right? Where common nouns are just kind of a general. So Miss Fender is a proper noun, whereas teacher is a common noun. So Miss Fender needs to be capitalized. Days of the week, Friday is a proper noun and needs to be capitalized. The days or days of the week do not need to be capitalized, okay? If you are talking about the COVID-19, you're going to need to capitalize it, right? Because it is the name of the sickness that's essentially going around. So another thing with editing, we always want to make sure we are double spaced Times New Roman, which I currently am not Times New Roman, but let's start with our spacing. So if yours looks like this, you need to come to this little line spacing arrow area, click on it, and then hit double, okay? If it is not highlighted like mine is currently, it's not going to do it, okay? So for example, if I just go single, apparently part of it was clicked, but not all of it. So I need to go back and fix this. Next, we need Times New Roman, size 12, which is what we always do. Right now we're on Arial, so we're going to come here and click Times New Roman. We're going to do size 12. I automatically indented because I'm just so used to doing it, but you need to indent the top of each paragraph. And again, I don't have 3 to 5 here because we were just doing this as an example, okay? Let's look at lines really quick. So for your header, that should be right aligned, which is what I'm hovering over right now. Your title can be center aligned, and then the rest of it should be left aligned, okay? So sometimes people turn things in where the entire paper is center aligned. I notice it right away because I'm used to it. You guys might not, so if you have questions with this, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to go over it with you, okay? So let's read the first paragraph and see what we have. The quarantine for me has personally been kind of difficult. Okay. I'm going to change that to this quarantine. This quarantine for me has personally been kind of difficult. Let's just say this quarantine has been. I'm going to take out kind of as well because it makes it feel. We've talked in the past about how all of our words have meaning, right? So when we include words of like kind of or sort of or sometimes, it implies that it's not as bad as it is, or it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? It adds unnecessary information, but it also takes away from what we're saying. So this quarantine has been difficult is a much stronger sentence than this quarantine has been kind of difficult for me, okay? Again, introduction needs to kind of introduce some of the things we will be talking about later on. So I said there are nice things like sleeping in, seeing my dogs, cooking more, extra time for reading, and time for projects. I have has here, which is kind of implying we're talking about it almost in the past, versus are, which is present. Let's see how I want to word this. There are nice. I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to say during this quarantine, there have been nice things like sleeping in, seeing my dogs, cooking more, extra time for reading, and time for projects. Let's do that. Such as. During this quarantine, there have been nice things. I'm going to do a semicolon. A period would work here as well. But semicolon is when you're kind of combining two sentences that could stand independently. Since this one could, I'm going to leave it like that. But the negatives of this quarantine far outweigh the positives for me. So I'm tying this into who I am. That's okay. It's not the best sentence, but it's not the end of the world, right? It says I'm not sleeping as well as normal. I am nervous about my family and friends. I miss school and my students and am just so crazy bored. So how about this crazy is fun and it shows my personality a little bit, so I could leave it in, but I am going to go ahead and take it out. I'm just so bored. That sounds great as well. So the big things are to remember your proper versus common nouns. Notice how through this, I don't have one period at the end. I have periods at the end of every sentence, okay? So when I finish my thought, finish with the idea I'm currently working on, I have a period. The reason those are important is that reminds us when to breathe. So sometimes people turn in papers where they forget all periods. So if I had done that, this one would be very difficult to read. Let me give you an example. I will try to read this entire paragraph with no periods, and I will probably have a hard time breathing, but let's see what I can do, okay? This quarantine has been very difficult. During this quarantine, there have been nice things such as sleeping in, seeing my dogs, cooking more, extra time for reading, and time for projects. But the negatives of this quarantine far outweigh. I can't do it. I cannot only make it half the way through the paragraph, okay? Periods are when we take a breath after the end of the idea. You shouldn't have an entire paragraph with one period. We are not to that level that we can properly do that, okay? So make sure you're including periods. Make sure you're including your capitalization. Be careful with your commas. We've done some work with them, talking about lists. We've done introductory phrases or introductory words such as but. That's an introductory word. It's a hard one to start a sentence with, but as I just did, but it can definitely work. Similarly, is another introductory word. Secondly, or firstly, we've talked about these in the past. So if you have one of those, you have the comma. We're not going to go through and edit all of this, but again, just remember anytime you see something underlined, you need to take a look. So this one says, I want to make it clear that we are currently trying to do our best to stay away from people. So I had a comma and they said, hey, that's unnecessary. Sometimes you need to reread it because it's not always 100% correct, but just do your best, okay? If you have questions about this, please shoot me an email and just do your best, but make sure you do go through and give them a once over. I don't want to see a bunch of words underlined because they should have already been corrected, okay? Have an awesome day. I will see some of you guys on Wednesday and the rest next Monday. Talk to you later. Bye.